The Southwest Freeway has been shut down for 45 minutes outbound over Shepherd. Traffic is backed up way back to your mama's house, back to the George Brown Convention Center.
Houston, Texas, population 1.6 million, the fourth largest city in the United States, the largest in landmass, covering 600 square miles. Houstonians drive 2 million cars on more than 7,000 miles of paved roads. Each year we get an emergency response to 12,000 fires, 59,000 medical emergencies, and we make over 1 million calls to the police. We make 526,000 patient visits to city-operated health centers, check out 6 million library books, and play on 51,000 acres of parks. And every 2 years, we cast more than 200,000 votes in city elections. Houston city government helps to make all this possible.
Well, city government is an institution established by charter to provide for services that the citizens of Houston believe they need that they're not able to provide for themselves, such as water and sewer service, garbage collection, police and fire service, libraries, parks, a variety of services like that. The fact is that 2 million people could not survive for very long if they did not have running water or responsible disposition of sewage, if the garbage wasn't picked up and disposed of on a weekly basis. Those are some of the things that city government does that are essential.
There are some things that city government does not provide.
It doesn't provide the court system, the criminal court system, or the civil court system, although the city government does have municipal courts, traffic tickets, municipal citations. It doesn't provide flood control work, the big system of flood control conduits like Brays Bayou. That's the county, not the city.
And it's not connected with schools or responsible for schools. It's not responsible for public hospitals. That's the hospital district under county government. It's not responsible for operating the Port Authority. That too is a separate governmental agency. The city has something to do with it, but it's very indirect.
Governing Houston is a great challenge for our elected officials. Our city has a mayor-council form of government. It's considered a strong mayor-council form, and as you will see, there are differing opinions about just how strong our mayor is or should be. Besides a mayor, we also have an elected council and an elected controller, whose powers are meant to balance and complement the mayor's authority. Today, you will hear from some of those who have held key positions in Houston's government and get insider accounts of governing Houston.
In Houston, the mayor is the chief executive and the administrator of the city. The mayor shares decision-making with the city council, the legislative branch similar to the Congress, and the city controller, who manages city finances. They all answer to the voting public, the citizens of Houston.
I think it literally is true that in city government, citizens have more direct contact with what goes on in that government than in any other form of government.
The real purpose of local government is to provide a forum for people living in a community to determine what affairs they want to have allowed for in their community and how they want their community to look. It is the last bastion, if you will, of government in this country where that free public forum is available to everybody.
Residents of Houston can speak directly to City Council at its regularly scheduled meetings each Tuesday by calling the city secretary and requesting to be placed on the agenda.
They come before council each Tuesday, and for, say, 3.5 hours every Tuesday, we have a time first when council members can speak, but then that we can listen to the people come. They can sign up by 5 o'clock the day before and then speak for 1, 2, or 3 minutes. And it can be about what is going to be on the agenda the following day, or it can be anything else. We really have an open forum every Tuesday.
As of 1993, elected officials are limited to 3 two-year terms and can never be elected to the same city office again. The mayor, council, and controller are elected in nonpartisan elections, which means that a candidate's party affiliation is not listed on the ballot.
Actually, our elections in municipal government in Texas are carried out on a nonpartisan basis because the state government told us to do it that way. That's a decision that was made at the state level, not at the city level.
As a practical matter, nonpartisan elections make it much easier to be a part of city government. You have one less layer of potential conflict to deal with, and so you're not interested in what someone thinks as a Democrat or as a Republican. You are arguing over the issues involved, and that is a tremendous help.
Every 2 years, we elect a mayor, a city controller, and 14 council members. The mayor, controller, and 5 of the council members are elected at large or citywide. All voters cast a vote in citywide elections. The other 9 council members must live in and be elected by voters in specific districts. The city is divided into 9 districts, and the residents of a district vote for one council person to represent their district. So what do these elected officials do once in office? Let's begin with the mayor.
Well, the mayor is the strongest mayor in the country. The mayor of Houston has more power than any other mayor under any other charter or form of government in the entire United States. The mayor presides over the legislature, the city council, presides over the judicial system, the municipal courts, appoints all the officials, so has all the administrative power as well.
In Houston, Texas, the mayor is the city manager. He is the chief representative in all protocol relationships. He is the chairman of the legislative body, and he is the man who appoints all of the department heads, and they are subject, of course, to confirmation by the city council.
The mayor is the person who is technically responsible for managing the city, making a budget proposal, which then has to be approved by city council, appointing department directors to manage each department. They too have to be approved by city council, but the mayor really is the person that citizens look to make sure that their needs are being met.
The mayor presides over city council meetings and votes on all issues. Unlike the President of the United States, he does not have a veto. He cannot overrule a council decision, but the mayor does participate in council discussion and cast the first vote.
The advantage of it from the mayor's standpoint is that the mayor votes first, therefore everyone on council knows the mayor's position. The mayor also has to stick his or her neck out first on an issue that may be controversial. So the mayor is the first person that has to go out on the limb and begin sawing if that's what's going to happen.
Probably the more important even than the vote is the fact that you're at the table and you're an active participant in the debate that goes on relative to the legislative proposals. Where you're not there is, for example, the president is not there in Congress, the governor is not there in the state legislature. Both of them have a diminished role in the legislative process because they are not active participants in the debate.
Others feel that the mayor's presence on council inhibits council debate.
You get the mayor off council, now you got a council standing alone. The news media, the cameras are rolling. What are you going to do, council? Just rubber stamp everything the mayor presents to you? No, there'll be debate. There'll be much more open debate.
All city departments are under the mayor's jurisdiction. Council approves department head appointments, but the mayor can remove a department head at any time.
The mayor needed to have the ability, if someone wasn't working out, to not have to get approval for that judgment, to be able to send the person packing if that's what the mayor felt was appropriate. What isn't provided for and what I think should be provided for is a situation where some portion of council, probably 2/3, maybe 3/4, should be able to vote for the removal of a department head that council collectively believes is doing a sorry job.
If the city council were able to fire the department heads, then the department heads would no longer be clear about who they report to. And the department heads are responsible, first and foremost, to the mayor.
In addition, the mayor has ceremonial duties, such as greeting official visitors, attending public functions as the city's representative, administering oaths, and signing ordinances, resolutions, and motions of City Council. The mayor's most critical function is preparing the city's budget, which is presented to council for approval.
The budget submitted by the mayor is a very detailed budget that explains what all the programs will be in each department, and usually includes some kind of performance measures to indicate how many people are expected to receive inoculations in the health department, to indicate what kinds of new programs will be implemented in the police department, how many officers will be on patrol in each division, those kinds of specific measures of what will actually be done.
We start out by developing what we call our budget projections. What kind of revenues are we looking at for the near term or the long term? And then we develop priorities. Priorities in the context of what is it that the mayor and the city council, as the elected body, would like to see considered. Once those priorities are established, then the budget staff will sit down and put dollars beside those priorities. It then goes through a hearing process, a series of public hearings with the public and with the city council. There are briefings. And once questions are resolved, modifications are made, or budget items are amended by the city council, then it is finally adopted. And that exercise typically takes about 7 months.
In effect, the way it happens is the mayor comes up with his budget with all his experts saying, this is what we need. Okay, council, here it is. And if you want to make a change, for instance, you want to add a program, you find the money in the budget.
Council legislates using ordinances, resolutions, and motions. For instance, council may make a motion to refer an agenda item on for further study or to drop it entirely. It may create a resolution, which is a statement of opinion or intent. Resolutions range from declaring an honorary day for a group of citizens to instructing the city attorney's office to take legal action. An ordinance is a law of the city. Most often, ordinances are used to approve city contracts, but they can also govern behavior, like the smoking ordinance. Twice a week, council holds open meetings. Tuesday, it listens to the public, and on Wednesday, council members debate the issues and vote on the agenda items. The mayor prepares the agenda, and it is posted outside City Hall on Friday, the week before the meeting.
The mayor, in our form of government, nearly has to approve something for it to go on the council agenda, because he or she is the one who sets the agenda. That's a very important power that our mayor has, that not all mayors have.
Under our practice, any council member can request an item be put on the agenda, and we do so.
There's nothing that requires a council member's request to be put on their agenda. It's controlled by the mayor like everything else.
Does setting the agenda, preparing the budget, firing department heads, and voting on council give the mayor all the power? Not exactly. The city charter gives council considerable authority. Council has final approval on the budget, on department head appointments, and on all city contracts. Council can pass laws, establish city departments, lease or dispose of city property, and issue bonds to fund city operation. It also determines the salaries of city employees, and it sets the public utility rates. A simple majority of 8 council votes can overrule the mayor's proposals, but some say this doesn't happen often.
I think I've seen a roll call vote go against the mayor maybe twice, and both of those were under the previous administration, because again, the mayor carries the greatest of weight. And often the proposals we vote on are the mayor's proposals. So why is anybody going to vote against the mayor? What do you gain by voting against the mayor?
The council members can't fight too much, because most any mayor with any strength can slow projects to their district, or can make their pet ideas wait for another 5 years, or can make them look bad, and can appoint them to committees that never meet, and give them tasks that are trivial, So the most council members defer to the mayor, and if they oppose the mayor, they're very careful how they do that.
I think in part, the mayor's office is and should be a service operation to the different members. They may know a particular district much better than I, so I'm inclined to give their views credence even over my own in terms of what ought to be done in a particular district. So it works best if we're working together.
The role of council should be, quote, as the legislative body of city government, passing on legislation which is presented to it in the form of ordinances, resolutions, contracts. But in fact, what I think city council is too often, almost always in fact, is a rubber stamp for the chief executive.
The only power that the council has is legislative. But they do have the legislative power. And they can use it if they want to. And they use it every time they vote for something the mayor proposes. It may look like it's a rubber stamp, but they have the right, anytime they don't want to pass it, to refuse to pass it.
According to the city charter, serving on council is supposed to be a part-time job. In reality, council members spend a lot of time outside City Hall attending to the needs and complaints of their constituents.
There's no length of time one has to spend, but quite a few of us probably spend 60 or 70 hours a week being a council member. Now, that means being out in the community. It means also voting on items on the agenda and meeting with constituents, being on committees, chairing task forces.
City council members spend a lot of time going to functions out in the community that may have little or nothing to do with city government, but have a lot to do with finding out what the voters are thinking about, what the people are thinking about. We go to civic club meetings, we go to Rotary and service organization meetings. We spend time calling together groups of citizens to talk to us about what's on their mind.
What's often on their minds are specific neighborhood concerns about city services. Citizens expect council members to get things done, even though they have no authority over city departments. While the duties of the at-large and district council members are exactly the same, citizens tend to think of their district council member as their representative.
2 of my 3 staff people, or 3 or 4 when I had 4, did nothing but constituent work. Pothole repairs that never got done, stop signs that need to be put up, dangerous buildings that ought to be torn down. All 3, I might add, the job of the mayor, not the job of a district council member to see that they get done.
As mayor, I found that the district council members were very good at dealing with constituent problems in their own parts of the city, being very knowledgeable about all the needs of that part of the city, and advocating that those needs be met. And at the same time, that at-large council members were able to spend more time looking at larger issues and developing policy proposals on issues that affect the entire city.
In addition to handling constituent complaints, most council members work on committees and task forces. Committees are most often appointed by the mayor to research issues and formulate proposals for the full council.
I was chairman of the Council Committee on Planning and Community Goals. We worked with a proposed zoning ordinance and a lot of other neighborhood protection items that were considered during the 1992-93 time frame. We heard from citizens, we held hearings, we did a lot of deliberating to try to put together a recommendation, a proposal for City Council as a whole to consider. And then, and other committees do the same thing. There's a committee on health care, there's a committee on inner city redevelopment and revitalization, there's a committee dealing with the aviation department.
I developed the first smoking ordinance for the city of Houston in 1986, and we had a task force that brought recommendations to council and the mayor after many meetings and after experts came from Washington and other places for and against smoking.
Just as the charter provides for a legislative balance of power between the mayor and the city council, it also provides for a financial check and balance in the form of an elected controller. The city controller is the chief financial officer of the city, responsible for supervising, managing, and conducting the city's financial affairs. Today, with the city's annual budget well in excess of $1 billion, an effective check and balance on how the city spends its money is more important than ever.
The charter specifically says that before council can adopt any ordinance for the expenditure of funds, They must receive a certification from the controller that the funds to pay for that action are in fact available, or that when the bill comes due for that action, the money will be in the bank to cover it.
The controller certifies that so much money is available by making an opinion as to how much money is going to be coming in this year. The mayor would like to disagree with that certification usually, because there are always another 500 citizen groups that want more police protection or public health services or parks improvements or whatever. And so the mayor and city council are under pressure to find more money, and the controller wants to certify a smaller amount as a way to make sure that the year is ended without a problem.
The other thing is the controller has a responsibility to speak up, to talk about the policies that underwrite the budget, about the direction in which the city's finances are going, about the consequences of the decisions that the mayor and the council might be taking in adopting this budget versus some other document. That's a less clearly stated but very important role of the controller as the city's chief financial officer and as the person who's there elected by the public to watch over the expenditure of money on behalf of the public.
And the controller has nothing whatever to do with policy, legally, but only to confirm or to refuse the payment of funds. And the only reason that he can give to refuse the payment of funds is if they've not been appropriated or are not available. Not because it's bad judgment, because that's none of his business.
In addition to projecting revenues and certifying the availability of funds, the Controller's Office sells the city's bonds, audits the city departments, and prepares the city's financial reports. The Controller also invests any surplus funds until they are needed for city expenses. This is one way the city generates income. Other sources include various taxes, fines, and fees. These all go into the general fund for day-to-day operating expenses.
The great bulk of the city's expenditures are for what are called general fund purposes. That is to say, those are the general activities of city government: police protection, fire protection, emergency medical service, libraries, parks, garbage pickup, street maintenance, the things that we associate with local government, the kinds of things that we all know need to be done to run a community, but which, if we were all left to our own devices, we couldn't do very well for ourselves. Those activities are paid for out of the general fund, and the money in the general fund is your general tax revenue. It's your property taxes, which are our single biggest source of revenue. There are sales tax, which are our second biggest source of revenue. We have franchise fees from various utilities like Houston Lighting and Power, and then we have things like traffic ticket fines, something I'm sure anyone watching this program has never been involved with, but I'm sure they know somebody who has. But every time you pay a parking ticket or a moving violation, that money goes to the general fund. In addition, we have several other funds which we call enterprise funds. Those are not tax supported. They're self-supporting funds. For example, our airport is an enterprise fund. And when people say, why are you building a new terminal out at the airport? We don't have any tax money as it is. Fact is, that's being paid for out of money from the airlines who are leasing gates. They're being paid for by the folks who travel on the airlines who pay a fee as part of their ticket price. Anybody who rents a car at the airport or parks their car at the airport, some of that money is going, or in the parking lot's case, all the money is going to the city of Houston. And we use that to run the airport. So it's a separate, standalone fund. Our water and sewer system is designed the same way. It is designed to be a separate, standalone fund that is paid for not out of tax dollars, but is paid for out of your water and sewer bill.
At times, the city needs to borrow money for a special public improvement project. To generate this money, the city sells municipal bonds.
But that really just means that when someone buys a bond from the city, they are loaning the city some money, and the bond represents the agreement between the lender, that is the person who bought the bond, and the borrower, that's the city. The bond is really just a piece of paper that explains what that agreement is. Who actually loans the money to the city? Well, it's people who have money to invest, and they have chosen not to invest it in the stock market, but rather to invest it in municipal bonds. The reason they do that, the reason they would invest in City of Houston municipal bonds, is because any interest that the city pays on those bonds to its bondholders or lenders will not be taxed by the federal government. It's tax exempt interest. And for that reason, the city doesn't have to pay very high interest rates. In addition to that, the city's a good credit risk. Nobody really thinks it's going out of business. In fact, it has a high rating by the bond rating agencies. Nobody thinks it's going bankrupt, and therefore some people will invest in the city instead of investing in, for example, the stock market, where they feel their money would be more at risk. Because in a bond agreement, the city agrees to pay back the full amount of the money that it borrowed, plus an interest payment every year.
Over the years, Houston has tried other forms of city government, with each evolving into the next. Our current mayor-council form of government is a product of Houston's unique history.
In 1836, the Allen brothers purchased 6,000 acres of land along Buffalo Bayou and founded a settlement. The next year they incorporated and elected the first mayor. Houston was 9 square miles with a population of 1,000. Until the turn of the century, Galveston was the largest city in Texas, but in 1900 it was struck by a hurricane and was virtually destroyed. 4 months later, oil was discovered near Beaumont. Houston saw the opportunity to capitalize on this newfound wealth and entered an era of unprecedented growth. In 1905, Houston was granted a city charter by the Texas legislature. The original charter outlined the responsibilities of the mayor, the controller, and 4 aldermen elected from wards. The mayor was Baldwin Rice. His administration built the first bridges across Buffalo Bayou, bought the water company, and launched the first large-scale paving and sewer projects. He also developed the park system, starting with Herman Park, and opened the first library. He supervised initial construction of Rice University, developed the Houston Symphony Orchestra, and oversaw the creation of the Port of Houston. All this growth was not without problems. The water supply and sewer system were described as cesspools, and the city lacked adequate fire protection. By 1912, the city was ripe for new leadership and a change in the way the city was governed.
There was a movement to empower local governments, give people more discretion in cities. Now, our counties are very limited by the state rules, but the home rule that Texas has had for 80 years gives municipalities, cities like Houston or Pasadena, if they choose, the opportunity to enact their own charter and basically to pass most local laws that they think are appropriate without state interference.
In 1913, Ben Campbell was elected mayor. Using the recently passed Home Rule Amendment in the state constitution, the city charter was changed to establish a commission system of government. Candidates ran for 4 commissioners' posts: tax and land, fire, streets and bridges, and water.
The commission form of government actually started in Galveston, Texas. After the hurricane in 1900, the citizens got together and they had to do something to manage a city that was in desperate need. And so what they did was basically divide up the responsibilities among the different council members. And that form of government became very popular, and cities all across the United States adopted the commission form of government, where each individual council member took on some specific responsibility.
The idea was that this would be a more efficient way of providing local governmental services. It turns out it's not really that efficient. It doesn't necessarily provide better services, and the commissioners tend to develop their own little fiefdoms, their own little kingdoms in the fire department or in the police department. And so coordination of government policy becomes more difficult. No one's really in charge. There's no executive that's responsible for running things in a commission system.
The commission system prevailed for the next 30 years. The commissioners were most responsive to the interest of business, believing that the business of government is business.
Through all of this, you had one individual that was the most powerful political leader in the city, Oscar Holcomb. Over a 37-year period, he was mayor 11 times. He'd serve a few terms and then drop out and come back. And Holcomb was a powerful behind-the-scenes influencer of these movements.
Holcomb was responsible for creating the Houston Independent School District, purchasing Memorial Park, creating the Downtown Civic Center, building Jefferson Davis Hospital, the first public charity hospital in Houston, and Hobby Airport, Houston's first municipal airport. He also persuaded several neighboring communities to merge with Houston and began the annexation programs that have made Houston one of the largest cities in the nation.
I think the commission system, not only here but around the country, fell out of favor increasingly in the 1930s when cities faced new challenges, the terrible economic problems. And so we went back to a system of governance using a city manager for a while.
In 1942, voters approved the city manager system and temporarily ousted Holcomb from office. He would return in less than 5 years with more power than ever. The revised charter created an 8-member council. All members were elected in a citywide election, although 5 of them were required to live in specific districts. These districts were called wards and are still referred to today when describing the areas of town they covered. Under the new council-manager system, the council was charged with making laws, rules, and regulations but had no administrative duties. Running the city according to the rules set up by the council was the job of the city manager, whom the council hired and fired. The mayor became a figurehead with little authority. The council-manager system is used in many cities today, including San Antonio, Galveston, and Dallas.
In the council-manager form of government, the city council, elected by the people either by district or at large, appoint or hire a city manager. The city manager, therefore, then becomes the chief executive, but reports to a city council.
The city manager basically runs the administrative side of the city. He or she hires the police chief, the fire chief, they administer the budget, and basically run the city on a day-to-day basis.
With the council manager form of government, what you get is better continuity. You have less disruptions when there's a change in council or the mayor.
One of the criticisms occasionally is that the city manager has too much power and is not responsible to the citizens, and that's often brought up in a council manager form of government. But we try to point out to the citizens that he is responsible to all of us on the city council, and if we feel that that person has a problem, we can just dismiss that individual.
The city manager system in Houston lasted only 4 years during World War II. The wartime shortage of men and supplies hampered the delivery of services, and the new form of city government took the blame.
There was a lot of feeling again that the city government wasn't working right, that we ought to shake things up again. So rather quickly and without much reflection, we went through, or the city governing folks went through, and altered the city charter again, and basically eliminated the city manager, and interestingly just gave all that power to the mayor. So this, rather without much thought, we created the strongest mayor system of governance in the country. The principal selling argument is you've concentrated authority so you know who to hold responsible. There's no question in Houston that the mayor is the executive of the city, and if you don't like what's going on, vote the mayor out. So the idea is it connects voters to the governing structure very directly. So it's responsible government is the principal argument for it. The critics argue it concentrates too much power in one individual. A former city council member said it's King Kong and the 14 chimps down at City Hall, and Kong has all the bananas. So in this town, when there's a fight over policy, the mayor almost always wins because they have so much power in the governing structure.
Houston has continued to grow under the strong mayor-council form of city government, mostly through annexation.
Texas has very liberal annexation laws from the point of view of the city that wants to annex. For example, there's something here called the extraterritorial jurisdiction, ETJ. The city of Houston is about 600 square miles large, but the ETJ around the city is about 1,200 square miles. This is a zone where Houston has asserted its authority, and for example, residents in Kingwood that are in the ETJ can't incorporate their own city. They have to come to the city of Houston and ask for permission. Same in the Woodlands. Well, the answer is always the same. No, you can't incorporate. These areas are subject to annexation by the city without a vote of the local residents.
Unlike any other city, maybe in the world, a mere majority vote of city council and mayor, without a vote of the public, determines whether we add land or subtract land. But when you add land, if you add 50,000 Anglos, that will give Anglos 50,000 more votes. If you add 50,000 blacks, you get 50,000 blacks, and that gives the blacks the votes, and so on. So where you annex and how you annex has a great deal of effect on the voting of the community.
In 1975, the United States extended the Voting Rights Act to cover Texas. The act requires that changes in a local government's electoral system that alter minority voting strength must be pre-cleared either by the U.S. Attorney General or by the federal court.
The legal debate surrounding the way City Council is elected went on for many years. One black had been elected, one Hispanic. But many people said in the 70s that was not nearly enough representation for the very rapidly growing black and Hispanic communities in Houston, and that if we had districts, then we would be able to see more ethnic representation. The arguments against the districts said that if we divide the city into districts and elect all of our council members from those districts, we will just have a parochial fight, much like what we see in Congress, where every member is advocating for the project that his or her district needs, and nobody is looking at the overall picture.
In 1979, Houston annexed about 75 square miles of territory along I-45 South near Clear Lake. The 150,000 mostly white population living there sued for de-annexation.
The suburbanites in Clear Lake were being annexed against their will by the city of Houston. So they put up a long struggle in the legislature, in the federal courts, took it all the way to the United States Supreme Court, trying to get out of the city of Houston, which had annexed them against their will. At the same time, within the city, you had black and to some degree Hispanic political leaders that didn't like the at-large council system of election, where you had 8 council members, but they all ran throughout the city without regard to districts. So they had attacked the city under the Voting Rights Act for using a system of election that didn't represent minority interest. So that was a separate lawsuit. But in the late 70s, these two issues came together when Houston wanted to do its annexation, and the minority political leaders said, aha, now we've got a lever to attack city government, because we're going to say, since this at-large system doesn't work for minorities, if you bring in more white voters, Clear Lake, this will even more disadvantage us if we use an at-large system. And they got the Justice Department to intervene on the side of the minority plaintiffs and eventually force the city into a deal. In order to continue annexing, the city had to agree to go to a system of mixed council elections where the council was expanded from 8 to 14, and 9 of the members would be elected from geographic districts within the city.
Within the city, we've broken the city council down so it has these districts and some at large. But the idea was that the districts would guarantee minority representation. Ironically, that may mean that the districts will guarantee Anglo representation because the population has changed over the years. But initially it was drawn to make sure there would be some black, some Hispanic on city council. And the way you did that is you simply drew the lines to include neighborhoods or areas of town that were predominantly black and areas that were predominantly Hispanic.
Citizens have the power to change city government. Our government is organized with a document called a city charter, and it can be amended using a petition process. A petition with the signatures of 20,000 qualified voters can bring a change in the charter to a vote of the citizens. Charter amendments can be voted on every 2 years.
Citizens can also make new laws for the city by using their power of initiative.
If citizens want to make an ordinance, the city council has not adopted the ordinance that you think is the one that's needed, and you want to have an ordinance adopted, then you can gather petitions and bring that ordinance forward, and the city council then has no choice but to offer it to the voters to be considered. It can be an ordinance or it can be an amendment to the city charter.
That's how we got term limits. A bunch of folks thought these people down at City Hall are staying too long, let's turn them over. So they went out and got enough folks to sign a petition that we had a vote on council and mayor being limited.
The procedure is similar for a referendum to change a piece of legislation already passed by council or a recall to remove an elected official from office.
Okay, we've talked about initiative. A referendum is a little bit different. That's when the city council votes to do something and the citizens don't like it. and they gather petitions asking to repeal what City Council has already done.
Once an ordinance is passed in a popular election, it can only be amended or repealed by another vote of the people. So who really has the power in city government? Ultimately, it's the registered voter. The mayor, council, and controller make their decisions on our behalf. As citizens, we must educate ourselves on our city officials and our city government. The information is all around us. Newspapers and television cover City Hall each week. Council meetings are open to the public and are broadcast on the local cable access channel.
It's important for people to keep up with what's happening in city government because the city council members need the input of citizens. City council members are deciding about tax rates. They're deciding about land use issues such as zoning, for example. They're deciding about annexation. They're deciding about how our money will be spent, how much for health programs, how much for parks, libraries, police, fire protection, and they really do need to hear from the public.
Our elected officials have a great challenge to govern Houston fairly and effectively. When we elect them, we give them control over many aspects of our daily lives. If we are to preserve this form of direct representation, it is our responsibility to understand how our government works and to cast our vote in every election.
The city government is closer to the people than any other level of government. It has to do with the quality of the water you drink, the kind of traffic control that you have, the security that you feel in your homes, on your way to school. It has to do with the quality of the recreation and cultural activities of your community. It has to do with the economic desirability. It has to do with the value of your property. It touches the lives of everyone much more closely than the county, state, or federal government ever will, because we continually live within the environment. Even the air that we breathe is policed by the municipal government. I don't know anything that invites citizen participation with more urgency than attention to city government. And I would urge every citizen to realize that the city that they're going to have tomorrow depends on the participation they have in it today.